speak publicly today for the first time after the Orlando murders, and I want to associate myself and the whole Gibraltarian nation with the words of condolence that have rang out from across the world to the American people, and in particular to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities. Mr. Chairman, tonight, Gibraltar's iconic Moorish castle will be lit in the colors of the rainbow to reflect respect for life and to stand up against barbarity. Let me also start by congratulating you on your taking the chair of this committee. But let me not lull you into any idea that you should feel any sense of satisfaction in having achieved the chair. You see, our people are suffering today not the yoke of colonialism, but the suppression of their inalienable international legal rights as a result of the deliberate inaction by this committee. Because let's be clear, Mr. Chairman, this committee is established for a clear purpose. The purposes you have laudably described in your introduction, but which we do not in Gibraltar see you pursuing. Your mandate is to protect and promote the interests of the people of the non-self-governing territories. But you are failing spectacularly in this mission. In Gibraltar, you have been completely absent in the work you have described in your introduction. We want less movies, less murals, less press releases, and more action. Exactly the point made by Her Excellency, the distinguished delegate of Cuba. It should also be clear that you are not appointed to act as referees or arbiters in the territorial or other disputes which might exist between member states. The experienced and distinguished Joe Bossano reminded you in detail of this in Nicaragua 2 weeks ago. I wish to thank the government of Nicaragua for having welcomed Joe so well again this year. Yet your predecessor, His Excellency Javier Lasso Mendoza, told me last year to be patient and to understand the limits of this committee's power. He even told me that in inviting you to visit Gibraltar and to opine on our constitutional development, I was asking the committee to do things it was not empowered to do. He was, of course, wrong. And his answers demonstrate why your committee's inaction is so corrosive of the international legal order. Your powers and obligations are set out clearly in the Charter and other instruments. You are definitely empowered to carry out visiting missions to listed territories. That is what I was asking the committee to do last year, and I'm delighted to see that you want to invigorate that aspect of the committee's work. I was asking that you come to Gibraltar, that you see the reality of our lives. And in parallel to my request for a visit earlier this year, I wrote inviting the committee to hold its annual seminar in Gibraltar. I want to thank you personally, Mr. Chairman, for the frank and clear letter in response telling us why you could not come. You told us that the alleged territorial dispute relating to Gibraltar prevents you from holding the seminar in our country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for what I consider to be your refreshing candor. You have confirmed what we already knew, of course, that the spurious Spanish claims to the sovereignty of our land are in fact being allowed to influence this committee in an entirely inappropriate manner. So we don't know which territories you will agree to go to this year, Mr. Chairman, but it seems that we know you will not be coming to Gibraltar. What the committee should ask itself is this: if Spain thought that coming to Gibraltar would persuade you of the veracity of her arguments, wouldn't her ambassador be urging you to come to the territory? So isn't it obvious to you and to the rest of the international community that Spain knows that the reality on the ground in our small nation is entirely contrary to its pernicious and untrue rhetoric, of which no doubt you will hear more today? If not, I challenge His Excellency, the Honorable Ambassador of Spain, to tell us why do they purport to block your visit? In fact, the committee would do well to read the soon-to-be-published seminal judgment of the Court of Arbitration for Sport in the case brought by the Gibraltar Football Association against FIFA. That distinguished international court has recently overturned Spain's objections to our entry into the organization that governs world football. The CAS found that there was no legitimate sovereignty dispute over Gibraltar, and there is no pending legal dispute as a matter of public international law. Indeed, it is 50 years this year since the United Kingdom challenged the government of Spain to test its sovereignty claim to Gibraltar before the International Court of Justice. Half a century later, Spain has still not submitted to an objective determination of the issues. This is not an anniversary for the Spanish government to celebrate. 5 decades have passed, and now it must be clear to you that Spain knows it would never prevail against us in a court which fairly and objectively applied our rights under the UN Charter and the established principles of international law. As a number of Spanish diplomats have themselves declared publicly after retirement, the Spanish claims against Gibraltar are completely flawed. Having ceded Gibraltar by treaty over 300 years ago, Spain now relies on the pernicious collaborations of bodies like this committee to advance by stealth the claims it will not fight in court. Because by failing to act as you are required to do, you are not acting neutrally, Mr. Chairman, as you suggest in your letter. You are in effect taking Spain's side against us, the people to whom you owe a sacred trust. But make no mistake about it, Spain is factually, legally, and morally wrong in all the contentions it makes on the question of Gibraltar, especially the defamations she makes of us here. And for that reason, she will never prevail in her misconceived, illegal, and immoral claim to take our homes against our will. Generations of Gibraltarian leaders have crossed the ocean to come here in defense of our rights. I have crossed the ocean once again this year to be here to speak for 10 minutes to show you that we will never surrender. My esteemed colleague, Joe Bossano, also crossed the ocean this year to challenge the manner in which you are allowing your seminar reports to be distorted by failing to reflect what was said at those meetings. That really is a stunning indictment of the way that this committee is conspiring with Spain against the interests of the people of Gibraltar. But we will ensure that the historical record reflects these failures each time that they occur, because each time that this committee acts in such a manner, it is a betrayal of the rights of the people who you are constituted to protect, but instead are trying to undermine. And that betrayal will not be allowed by us to pass unchallenged or unnoticed. Finally, as you will know, Mr. Chairman, Gibraltar will vote next week alongside the United Kingdom in the British referendum on continued membership of the European Union. The current caretaker Spanish Foreign Minister is already threatening to impose restrictions at our frontier in the event that the UK were to leave the EU. Senor Margallo has said that if we want post-Brexit access to the single European market, we would have to accept joint sovereignty between the UK and Spain. That is political blackmail of the most infantile sort. Let me ensure we are clear with Senor Margallo, with the whole government of the Kingdom of Spain, and with this committee, Mr. Chairman. We want friendship and cooperation with the people of Spain. But the people of Gibraltar said no to joint sovereignty in our referendum of 2002. By 98%, we rejected joint sovereignty then. But that was obviously not loud and clear enough. So let me be unequivocal so that there is no mistake or any further foolish repetition of this warped notion for the transfer of our sovereignty. Gibraltar is not for sale. The Gibraltarians will not be bribed. The Gibraltarians will never surrender. We will never, ever be Spanish. Spain gave up Gibraltar forever in 1713 in the Treaty of Utrecht, and we have not changed and will not ever change our position. His Excellency, the distinguished Spanish ambassador, should get his political masters a dictionary so that they can look up never and forever and work out once and for all what we are saying. I know my words, Mr. Chairman, will frustrate the expansionist ambitions of the Spanish government to redraw the map of Southern Europe. I also know that my words here today echo the wishes of all the people of Gibraltar. And those wishes are what should matter most to you if you were to finally stand up and fulfill your obligations to the people of Gibraltar as you must. That is what you are here for. That is what the Charter requires of you. That is what we expect. Thank you very much for listening, Mr. Chairman.
Gracias al ministro principal de Gibraltar y su delegación. Lo hemos escuchado con mucho respeto. a pesar de tiene un tono un poco agresivo, pero con mucho respeto. Lo escuchamos acá y tomamos su punto. Se trata justamente de escuchar todos los puntos de vista en las partes que están en el conflicto. Bien, ahora invito a la representante de España a formular una declaración. Adelante.
Gracias, señor presidente. Perdón. Los pasados días 31 de mayo a 2 de junio se celebró en Nicaragua una nueva edición del Seminario Regional sobre Descolonización, ocasión que nos permitió estudiar conjuntamente la evolución de los trabajos en el marco del tercer decenio internacional para la erradicación del colonialismo 2011-2020. Aprovecho este momento para dar nuevamente las gracias al Gobierno de Nicaragua por su hospitalidad y la excelente organización del evento. España subraya su compromiso y respaldo a la labor que viene realizando el Comité de los 24, fundamental para acabar con el colonialismo y para aplicar las medidas conducentes a lograr los objetivos del citado tercer decenio, y en particular poner fin a la situación colonial anacrónica que España sigue sufriendo en pleno siglo XXI. Esta organización ha reconocido en numerosas ocasiones la especificidad del proceso descolonizador de Gibraltar, al señalar que la situación colonial de Gibraltar menoscaba la integridad territorial de España. Así quedó patente en la Resolución 2353-22 de 19 de diciembre de 1967 de la Asamblea General. En este sentido, Naciones Unidas ha señalado con claridad que, en el proceso de descolonización de Gibraltar, el principio que debe regir no es el de libre determinación, sino el de restitución de la integridad territorial española. España mantiene que la solución pasa por una restitución del territorio, tanto del cedido conforme al Tratado de Utrecht de 1713, como del que fue ocupado posteriormente, de forma ilegal, por el Reino Unido sin título alguno, en particular el Istmo y las aguas circundantes. En Gibraltar nos encontramos con un caso de colonialismo consentido, que pretende perpetuarse al margen de los criterios establecidos por Naciones Unidas. La ocupación por parte del Reino Unido se produjo en 1704, en nombre del archiduque Carlos de Austria, pretendiente a la corona de España, en el contexto de la Guerra de Sucesión Española. El poblamiento de la colonia, planificado por el ocupante, es bien posterior a la conquista. Los españoles que habitaban Gibraltar hasta 1704, los auténticos gibraltareños, fueron obligados por la fuerza a abandonar el lugar y se establecieron en la vecina San Roque, cuyo ayuntamiento se denomina desde entonces Ayuntamiento de la ciudad de Gibraltar en San Roque. Así se producía una fractura en la comarca que pervive hasta hoy. Además, el Reino Unido se apropió ilegalmente de otros territorios no cedidos en el Tratado de Utrecht, que puso fin a la Guerra de Sucesión Española. Dicho tratado define con total claridad cuáles son los espacios cedidos al Reino Unido. Solo se cedieron la ciudad y el castillo de Gibraltar, junto con su puerto, únicamente con sus aguas interiores, las defensas y fortalezas que le pertenecen. Las aguas que rodean Gibraltar nunca se cedieron, por lo que permanecieron y permanecen bajo soberanía española. En cuanto al istmo que separa el Peñón del resto de la península ibérica, tampoco fue cedido en el Tratado de Utrecht. Lo que ocurrió es que, ya en el siglo XIX, España permitió al Reino Unido, por razones humanitarias, establecer unos campamentos provisionales para evitar el contagio de la población del Peñón, entonces afectada por una epidemia de fiebre amarilla. La epidemia pasó, pero los británicos, lejos de agradecer el gesto humanitario de España, no se retiraron. Al contrario, sucedió que, a pesar de las protestas españolas, esos asentamientos en suelo español fueron convirtiéndose en permanentes. En 1909, el Reino Unido construyó una verja, acotando la zona e intentando consolidar así la ocupación ilegal de territorio español. Desde hace 4 décadas, la Asamblea General viene instando a la potencia administradora y a España a que resuelvan todas sus diferencias en torno a esta cuestión. Las Naciones Unidas proponen una solución negociada bilateralmente entre España y el Reino Unido. Año tras año, una decisión adoptada por consenso por la Asamblea General viene recogiendo este mandato de diálogo bilateral. La misma señala también el marco en el que debe producirse dicha solución negociada, es decir, el de la Declaración Hispano-Británica realizada en Bruselas el 27 de noviembre de 1984 y que dio lugar pocos meses más tarde al denominado Proceso de Bruselas. A este respecto, España insiste en que la solución pasa por una restitución del territorio, tanto del cedido conforme al Tratado de Utrecht como del que fue de hecho ocupado posteriormente, de forma ilegal, insisto, por el Reino Unido sin título alguno, en particular el Istmo y las aguas circundantes. Señor presidente, quiero reiterar este punto. El Reino Unido ha ocupado, en contravención del derecho internacional, espacios de soberanía española que no le corresponden y que España nunca ha dejado de reivindicar. La solución que España demanda ante este comité es una solución conforme a derecho, es decir, conforme a las declaraciones de la Asamblea General, porque nosotros creemos que las diferencias entre Estados deben solventarse con el derecho internacional en la mano y con el diálogo, y no enrocándose en posturas unilaterales no amparadas por Naciones Unidas. Una solución que exige la reanudación inmediata de un diálogo bilateral con el Reino Unido en el que tratar todas las cuestiones de soberanía. En contravención del mandato de las Naciones Unidas y del compromiso adquirido por el propio Reino Unido en la Declaración de Bruselas de 1984, esas negociaciones hace ya años que no se están produciendo. La responsabilidad de este incumplimiento recae enteramente en la potencia administradora, que desde hace ya demasiados años viene negándose incluso a dialogar con España sobre el futuro de Gibraltar. Como se ha determinado ya en este comité, la relación entre Gibraltar y su potencia administradora es de naturaleza colonial. No estaríamos hablando aquí de Gibraltar hoy si fuera de otra manera. Las autoridades locales de Gibraltar existen porque así lo ha decidido la potencia administradora, y la Carta otorgada de 2006 por la que se rige el territorio de la colonia entró en vigor gracias a una orden del Foreign Office al gobernador de Gibraltar. El Reino Unido constituyó este territorio como una Crown Colony en 1830, como un British Dependent Territory en 1981 y como un British Overseas Territory en 2002, pero la esencia, señor presidente, sigue siendo la misma. Hoy, la colonia tiene que seguir recurriendo a la potencia administradora para que ésta le ampare, ya sea en el marco de la Unión Europea, ya sea ante la Organización para la Cooperación y Desarrollo Económico o en cualquier otro foro regional o mundial. El territorio británico de ultramar de Gibraltar sigue siendo una colonia, con una relación colonial con su metrópoli y una relación de sumisión e independencia que no puede ser camuflada. Este comité, desde luego, no tiene ninguna duda al respecto. Lo que pide, por tanto, España es el cumplimiento cabal de lo que Naciones Unidas ha dispuesto, esto es, entablar negociaciones con el Reino Unido para poner fin a esta situación colonial, negociaciones en las que se tendrán en cuenta los intereses de la población del territorio. Es este el mensaje que se ha trasladado una y otra vez a las autoridades del Reino Unido a los más altos niveles y que yo deseo trasladar hoy aquí, una vez más, a pesar de que las dificultades de España con esta colonia no cesan, a causa de la actitud unilateral e irresponsable de las autoridades locales gibraltareñas. Estas dificultades se dan de manera diaria en los ámbitos pesquero, fiscal y en relación con ciertos tráficos ilícitos, por no citar sino los ejemplos más conocidos a nivel internacional. Así, en el ámbito pesquero, las autoridades locales de Gibraltar han hecho todo lo posible para que los pescadores españoles que venían faenando en las aguas españolas desde fechas inmemoriales dejen de pescar, impidiéndoles así ganarse su sustento. En este sentido, en marzo de 2012, decidieron unilateralmente dejar de aplicar el acuerdo informal que existía desde 1999 con las cofradías de pescadores españoles y en julio de 2013, para impedir de facto a los pescadores faenar, arrojaron cerca de 70 bloques de hormigón a la bahía de Algeciras, en aguas que España considera como propias y que servían de caladero tradicional a los pescadores españoles. Además, la colonia sigue manteniendo un régimen fiscal y financiero de naturaleza opaca y discriminatoria. Es bien conocido que Gibraltar es un paraíso fiscal y, como tal, un obstáculo para los esfuerzos de la comunidad internacional de lucha contra la evasión fiscal, el blanqueo de capitales y la financiación del terrorismo. En cuanto a los tráficos ilícitos, constatamos que, desgraciadamente, las autoridades locales gibraltareñas, más allá de meras declaraciones retóricas, no están cooperando debidamente, siendo el ejemplo más evidente el contrabando de tabaco, que se ha convertido en un grave problema. Entre 2010 y 2012, las aprehensiones de cajetillas de cigarrillos aumentaron en un 213%. Ante esta situación y la pasividad de las autoridades gibraltareñas, España mejoró la eficacia de los controles en la verja, produciéndose un inmediato descenso del contrabando procedente de Gibraltar, que se ha conseguido reducir en casi un 30% con respecto a 2014. En definitiva, todos estos problemas generados en Gibraltar están causando inconvenientes a los ciudadanos tanto en Gibraltar como en el campo de Gibraltar y ha acentuado todavía más, si cabe, la urgencia de poner fin a esta situación colonial. En cualquier caso, pese al estancamiento que padece el mencionado proceso de Bruselas, mi país reitera una vez más su buena voluntad a la hora de desarrollar una cooperación de carácter regional que redunde en beneficio de los habitantes del campo de Gibraltar y de Gibraltar. Dicha cooperación regional debe dejar a un lado las cuestiones de soberanía y de jurisdicción, que corresponden exclusivamente a España y al Reino Unido, tal y como requiere la doctrina de esta organización. Así, España impulsó el Foro de Diálogo sobre Gibraltar en 2004 como una iniciativa dirigida a favorecer la cooperación en beneficio de los ciudadanos del campo de Gibraltar y de Gibraltar. Y por parte española, además, crear una atmósfera de mayor confianza en la que fuese posible negociar las cuestiones de soberanía en el momento oportuno y con mayores garantías de éxito. El foro quedó bloqueado en 2010 como consecuencia de la insistencia por parte de las autoridades locales de Gibraltar en utilizar las conversaciones sobre aspectos técnicos y cooperación local para avanzar en sus pretensiones en materia de soberanía. Por ello, en línea con lo dispuesto en la última decisión de consenso sobre Gibraltar, aprobada por la Asamblea General el pasado mes de diciembre de 2015, y en sintonía con las conclusiones de este mismo comité, estamos tratando de llegar desde hace años a un acuerdo con el Reino Unido sobre la puesta en marcha de un nuevo esquema de cooperación regional centrado únicamente en cuestiones que atañen directamente a la cooperación entre los habitantes de uno y otro lado de la verja. Este nuevo esquema contempla la participación, además de España y del Reino Unido, de las autoridades locales gibraltareñas y, a diferencia del ya desaparecido Foro Trilateral, también de las autoridades locales y regionales españolas competentes. Señor presidente, España quiere subrayar, una vez más, la importancia que concede al trabajo de este comité y a la necesidad de respetar el procedimiento establecido por esta organización en materia de descolonización. Frente a este respeto, desde el lado gibraltareño se continúan vertiendo acusaciones calumniosas contra este insigne comité, acusándole de parcialidad, de incumplir su mandato a la luz de la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, de infringir la propia Carta y de obviar las aspiraciones de la población de Gibraltar, tal y como hemos podido presenciar hace unos días en Managua durante el pasado Seminario Regional sobre Descolonización. Comportamiento que no hace sino subrayar lo acertado del criterio que sigue este comité. España insta una vez más a este comité especial a que no permita que, con argumentos contrarios a lo dispuesto en esta organización, se proceda a excluir de la correspondiente lista de las Naciones Unidas a territorios que no han sido descolonizados según los criterios del comité, y confía en que, bajo la competente dirección del mismo, puedan lograrse los progresos que requiere la descolonización de Gibraltar a la luz de las resoluciones pertinentes de la Asamblea General y los principios aplicables. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Gracias a la distinguida representante de España. Ahora, de conformidad con una solicitud de audiencia aprobada por nuestro buró, quisiéramos invitar al señor Richard Boutier-Guies del Grupo de Autodeterminación de Gibraltar. Tiene la palabra.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I thank you for the opportunity afforded to me to address you all. It has been almost 1 year to the date since I last appeared before this committee. I'm afraid to say that, unfortunately, this committee has not done anything at all in connection with the question of Gibraltar, as it is referred to in these circles. One is heartened to hear reports of press releases, website updates, photographs being uploaded, and tweets being propagated. But this does not deal with the substantive issue. This does not deal with the lives of the people who are affected by the issue. Propaganda can indeed be useful, but what Gibraltar needs is real action. To date, you continue to refuse to send a visiting mission to Gibraltar so that it can experience firsthand the treatment to which we are subjected to by the Kingdom of Spain. I hope that visiting Gibraltar finds its way into the resolution you mentioned recently that is currently being drafted, but I fear that that may not be the case. If you did come to Gibraltar, you would be able to see how Spanish police and customs vessels continuously trespass British Gibraltar territorial waters. Those waters which the distinguished delegation from Spain just refers to as being Spanish waters in flagrant disregard to international maritime law. Quite recently, Mr. Chairman, a United Kingdom Royal Naval vessel, in fact submarine, was traversing the British Gibraltar territorial waters, and the Gibraltarian authorities were forced to fire warning flares across the bow of a Guardia Civil vessel, which was recklessly impeding navigation of the submarine. The visiting mission would perhaps also be able to see the unjustified and unreasonable restriction of vehicular and pedestrian flow that Spain arbitrarily imposes at the Gibraltar frontier, in clear contravention of the freedom of movement of people and goods. If they had been there only last month, they could have seen how the Spanish authorities impeded the plane that was flying England's Minister for Foreign Affairs to Gibraltar from flying over Spanish airspace. Clearly not the behavior of a supposed NATO ally, and particularly shocking when one considers that the Spanish caretaker government has no compunction in allowing Russian warships to dock in the Spanish land very near to Gibraltar. If you saw these things for yourself, perhaps those visiting would be able to report back to the committee so that the rhetoric that you have just heard from the distinguished Spanish delegation could be put in context and the lies exposed. For example, you would be able to see for yourself, which they have not said today, that contraband of tobacco that they speak of is perpetrated by Spanish citizens using Spanish-registered vessels and loading in Spanish bays, because Gibraltar has in fact imposed very stringent legal requirements curbing the sale of tobacco in Gibraltar. You would also be able to see for yourselves that, contrary to what the current Spanish caretaker government asserts, we're not a parasitic nation comprised of a prefabricated community. Instead, you would see that Gibraltar and the Gibraltarians are part of a vibrant, tolerant, and peaceful culture that very much wishes to have a cordial and friendly relationship with Spain. We are nevertheless also a very proud and steadfast people, with a passionate and unwavering loyalty to our homeland and to our identity. We will never allow our wishes and aspirations to be trampled upon by an undemocratic bully who seems to think that we will one day yield to the demands simply because they repeat them ad nauseum. This committee, Mr. Chairman, has also not yet responded to Gibraltar's question about what else it needs to do to our constitution for it to be considered non-colonial. We ask this question because, in our view, the Gibraltar 2006 constitution is not akin to that of a colonial country. Its level of self-governance is not that. Our relationship with the United Kingdom is also non-colonial in nature. But if these factors are not enough, you should tell us what else needs to be done. What this committee cannot do, Mr. Chairman, is to ignore us whilst advocating that you wish to see the end of colonialism for Gibraltar. Exactly 10 days from today, my country will be facing a seminal moment in its political history. Together with the rest of the United Kingdom, we will be participating in a referendum which will decide whether the United Kingdom and therefore Gibraltar remain within the European Union. The result will have profound impact for Gibraltar in many ways. Unbelievably, however, given the day and age in which we live, one of the main threats Gibraltar will face comes from Spain. José Manuel García Margallo, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Spanish caretaker government, has already publicly stated that should the United Kingdom vote out of the European Union, Spain would seek to discuss Gibraltar's sovereignty the very next day. This comes from the man who taunts United Kingdom officials by saying that Gibraltar is Spanish whenever he sees them, somewhat rich coming from a person whose party cannot even form a government to run a country. Statements, however, which do not particularly affect the Gibraltarian, because we believe that Senor Margallo and his right-wing policies will long be forgotten in political obscurity before Gibraltar ever ceases to be British. But this committee should not be under any false illusions, Mr. Chairman. When Senor Margallo says these things, he very much means them as a threat. In his mind, Gibraltar should cease to be British or have its sovereignty shared without any regard for the wishes of the people of Gibraltar. Because if he truly cared one iota about the latter, he would have taken heed of 2 referenda in which Gibraltar have on both occasions overwhelmingly rejected any notion of joint sovereignty. So what Mr. Margallo really means with his statements is that Gibraltar does not really matter, and that the principles of democracy and self-determination can be completely disregarded as long as Spain can continue to pursue its hopeless, anachronistic, and irredentist claim over the Rock of Gibraltar. I honestly do not know what it will take for the Kingdom of Spain to finally accept that Gibraltar belongs to the Gibraltarians, that Gibraltar is immensely proud to be British, and that people of Gibraltar will never, ever capitulate. But the Gibraltarians will not lose hope. We are far too resolute for that to happen. We continue to fight our battles and to enjoy our small victories. Just recently, for example, Gibraltar was accepted into FIFA in spite of the huge lobbying campaign carried out by Spain in an attempt to prevent this. Achieving this was not easy and only happened following a ruling by the International Court of Arbitration for Sport. Perhaps that is the answer for the United Nations, for the International Court of Justice to intervene. Gibraltar has been and is very much willing to try its case before the ICJ, but unfortunately such proceedings cannot take place unless the Kingdom of Spain agrees to them. One would have thought that they would have jumped at the opportunity to achieve what they have obstinately sought for over 300 years, but it does not do so. Perhaps there is some sort of perverse pride to be derived by Gibraltar from the fact that such a powerful nation as Spain is unwilling to test their case in court. But it is a sad indictment of its democratic credentials or the lack of them that Spain denies the Gibraltarian the right of self-determination because it does not consider us a people, but it does not have the courage of its conviction to test that in court. But in the face of adversity, the Gibraltarian grows stronger. Since it became British in 1704, Gibraltar has survived 3 military sieges perpetrated or instigated by Spain. One could argue it has also survived a political siege which now spans over 50 years, which included General Franco's attempt to suffocate Gibraltar through the closure of the frontier between Gibraltar and Spain. So we have become accustomed to suffering the wrath of the Spain, which has to frustratingly witness our continued progression and growth. All they achieve is to galvanize our sense of patriotism and to forge an even stronger Gibraltarian identity. The tantrums are understandable, however, Mr. Chairman. It must not be easy for Spain to see us prospering in spite of their best efforts, to see Gibraltar accepted into international organizations, to see us increasingly praised as transparent and compliant financial center, and to have the United Kingdom hold us up to other territories as an example of a nation successfully fighting corruption head-on. And it is perhaps having to swallow those bitter pills that compels our neighbors to artificially create unnecessarily long queues at the frontier between Gibraltar and Spain in clear contravention of EU laws. What compels them to accuse us of being a tax haven, in spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary and positive endorsements from the likes of the International Monetary Fund or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. What makes Spain's caretaker Minister for Justice boycott an anti-corruption summit just because Gibraltar is invited to do so, although that perhaps could be due more to it being slightly embarrassing for a Spanish politician to participate in such a forum when the subject matter of the same is such a sensitive and alive issue in their own country. Mr. Chairman, esteemed members of the committee, I have said this before and will say it again. Please do not see us as secessionists. We are most certainly not. We do not seek to create any conflict or division whatsoever. We would love to live in harmony with our Spanish neighbors and to provide even greater prosperity than we already do to nearby Spain. All we ask is for it to be recognized that we are a people with the right to decide our own future for ourselves. And as I say, we will not lose hope because we believe that justice will one day prevail. Who knows? Perhaps it might even start to happen after the 27th of June if Spain finally manages to form a government at the second time of asking. If not, the resolve of the people of Gibraltar will remain as solid as the rock which they have inhabited for over 3 centuries. Our British Rock of Gibraltar, our land, our home, our nation. And if I may paraphrase John F. Kennedy, let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of our liberty. Thank you all for your time.
Gracias, señor Butiguier, por su declaración. Quisiera saber si hay algún otro miembro del comité que quiera hacer uso de la palabra. Bien, siendo así, Teniendo en cuenta nuestras deliberaciones y de conformidad con los métodos de trabajo establecidos en el comité, deseo proponer al comité que continúe el examen de la cuestión de Gibraltar en su próximo periodo de sesiones, con sujeción a las directrices que la Asamblea General pueda formular al respecto en su 71º periodo de sesiones. A fin de facilitar el examen de este tema, en la Comisión Política Especial y de Descolonización, 4ª Comisión, propongo que se transmita a la Asamblea en su 71º periodo de sesiones toda la documentación pertinente sobre el tema. ¿Debo considerar que el comité desea proceder de esa manera? No hay objeciones, así queda acordado. Señores miembros del comité, distinguidos delegados, dado el compromiso que tenemos con la inauguración de nuestra exposición para la Semana de Solidaridad con los pueblos en los territorios no bajo colonización, y tal como habíamos dicho esta mañana, y dado que el debate se prolongó más de lo que estaba diseñado, vamos a suspender la sesión por el día de hoy, quedando para el día de mañana la cuestión del Sahara Occidental y otros asuntos de nuestra agenda en el marco de nuestras discusiones de 10 a 1 de la mañana.